Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove and I am back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation that I've received over the past 7 days from our in-house clients, online clients, as well as a few of our online followers. Remember, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, training program, supplements you're taking, not taking, considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com. Or you can also DM me your questions on my Instagram at @fitcosgrove_. All right, let's get started with this week's No Filter Q&A with question number 1. Nick, is it okay to eat the skin on salmon? Absolutely. The skin on the salmon is packed with omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin B, vitamin D, contains tons of nutrients. So definitely, that's something that I advise my clients to do when they're having any red fish. So if it's trout or salmon, even snapper, if their fish comes with the skin on, leave it on. Okay, so like for example, at Costco, they sell their salmon with skin on. I always cook it with the skin on, always, and because all those nutrients are also going to go into the fish. So if you're someone who really can't stomach the skin of the fish, because I know there's some people, I work with a few clients that are like, no, I can't, that's gross. That's fine. Don't eat it, but still cook it with the skin on, because all those nutrients that I said, they'll go into the fish as you're cooking it. Okay. So if you can't stomach the skin, at least cook it with the skin on, and then you can take the skin off. But my recommendation is to keep the skin on and eat the skin. Okay. I think the skin is one of the best parts of the fish. It's one of the healthiest parts of the fish. So yes, to answer that question, if you're eating salmon, trout, leave the skin on, eat it. If you can't stomach it, cook it with the skin on at least. Okay, and then just take the skin off. That's my recommendation. All right, next question. Okay, hi Nick, I have severe pain in my elbows and knees while performing free weight exercises. The pain is not as bad if using machines, but I know machines don't build muscle. Is there anything I can do to make the pain go away? Well, first off, it's not that machines don't build muscle. Machines will assist in muscle building. However, free weights are optimal because free weights allow you to use your stabilizers. So that's why I always say free weights come first, right? Barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells, a few cable exercises like lat pull down, seated row, but then machines come secondary. What I mentioned this on the channel, I think 2 weeks ago, where I said you can't build a foundation off machines alone. You need to have that foundation through free weights. But machines have their place. They're just secondary to free weights. Okay. So I don't want you to think that machines don't build muscle, because you can build muscle using machines. Now, joint pain is pretty common, right? And just because you have joint pain doesn't necessarily mean that you have arthritis. A lot of people, they start freaking out. It's the first question I get from clients all the time is, oh my God, my joints are bothering me. Do I have arthritis? I'm like, probably not. Because usually if it's arthritis, you're going to notice other symptoms as well in your muscle bellies and your tendons. It doesn't just attack your joints. So before you go setting the alarm thinking that you have something wrong with you or you have arthritis, you got to backtrack a little bit and think, okay, am I doing something wrong in the gym? You know, you mentioned that when you do machines, they don't bother you as much. One of the things with machines is they allow you to control your range of motion, whereas with free weights, you have to control your range of motion. So what I mean by that is when you're doing, let's say, a barbell bench press, when you're coming up from that movement, you have to ensure that A, you're not locking out your joints on exertion, and B, when you come down, that you're controlling that so you're not putting too much tension on your rotator cuffs on the down phase, right? The eccentric contraction. So you've got to pay a really close attention to that. Whereas if you're doing, let's say, a vertical chest press on a machine, the machine allows you to control that range of motion. It's very hard to do something wrong on the machine, because if you're going to overexert, you're going to go like this, right, on the press. And the machine won't allow you to go too far back where you can impinge your shoulder. So that's the thing when you're doing free weights. You really have to pay attention to both the eccentric contraction and the concentric contraction. Whereas with the machines, they kind of dictate the movement for you. They control your range of motion, so you don't have to worry about that as much. So what I would suggest is if you're doing free weight movements, never lock out your joints. Always pay close attention. So if you're doing a barbell bench press, as I said, don't lock that elbow out. If you're doing a barbell squat, don't straighten your knee. Don't lock your knee up on exertion. I know it seems like common sense, but you wouldn't believe how many people I see doing this on a regular basis. Even some of my clients who've been with me for years, once they get tired in the middle of the set, let's say they're on rep number 10 or 11, and they're getting fatigued, the first thing they usually do, myself included sometimes, is lock a joint out just to rest. I don't mind someone resting for 1 or 2 seconds in between reps on a set, especially if they're doing a really heavy like barbell back squat, but you just have to make sure you never lock out your joint. You always want to make sure you keep the tension on the muscle belly and not the joint itself. So that's number one. Don't lock out your joint. If you're not sure if you're locking out your joint, ask your friend, training partner, or work with a personal trainer just to have a second set of eyes on you for your sets, and just ask him or her to say, oh, you are locking out your joint. You got to watch this, and they can call you on it as you're doing your set. Because sometimes you don't even know you're doing it. Another thing I would do is, I've talked about this a few times, but topicals. I'm a huge advocate of using topicals for joint pain. I know a lot of people think things like Tiger Balm and Voltaren should only be used for the muscle bellies. I actually like to use them on the joints. So especially on like a leg day, I'll actually put Tiger Balm on my knees before I train the legs, especially before I go in a squat rack. I find that works really well. I just feel that over time, as we get older, there's a little bit more wear and tear on the joints. So for myself personally, it takes me a little bit longer to warm up in the gym. So what I'll usually do is I'll apply some Tiger Balm about 10 minutes before I go in and train legs, just to the joints, knees, hips, and then I'm usually good to go. Now, you mentioned another thing too, is that when you do machines, they don't bother you. So you might want to actually start your workout off with the machine. Maybe if you're doing, let's say it's leg day. So before you get into the squat rack, maybe you want to go on a seated leg extension and knock out 15, 20 reps, 3 or 4 sets. Keep the weight very light, because all you're trying to do is fill those muscle bellies with blood, glycogen, and release synovial fluid into the joint. So they don't have to be working sets. They can just be warm-up sets. And then you can get into the squat rack, the hack squat, the leg press. So that's the third thing I'd recommend, is warm up sufficiently. So use a machine. You mentioned machines work for you, so use the machine to help warm up. So don't lock out your joints. Apply topical where needed. Okay, so elbows, rotator cuffs, hip flexors, hip abductors, your knees, patella, your meniscus in that area. That will help too. That's the second thing. And then finally, as I said, you really want to make sure, if machines in this case work better for you just to warm up, use the machine to warm up. Okay. If you don't have access to machines, let's say you're training out of a private facility and it's just primarily cables and free weights, then I would do some dynamic stretching prior to getting into, let's say, the squat rack or under the bar doing some bench press. Okay. All right, next question. Hey, Nick, I'm currently following your shoulder workout and noticed that you don't put the bench at 90 degrees while doing shoulder presses in your training video. Isn't the bench supposed to be completely up when training the shoulders? Yeah, so according to the PT manual, which I called out in my recent blog this week, when you're doing a shoulder press, you want your bench to be at 90 degrees. However, what I find works best for most people, including myself, is if you actually put the bench back a little bit to about 100, 110 degrees. Okay. And the reason why that is because especially for men, we're very immobile in this area. So especially once you put on a lot of muscle over the years. Like I can tell you right now, I feel like I'm fairly flexible, but I'm not as flexible as I was when I was 15 or 16. That's because I have more muscle mass. So I'm not as mobile as I used to be in my deltoids. They're a little bit more tight. So for me to be at 90 degrees, having that bench there, it puts a lot of strain, on my lumbar region, but B, it also puts a lot of strain on the rotator cuffs. And remember, when you're doing the dumbbell shoulder press, the goal is to keep the emphasis on the anterior deltoid. So the best way I find over the years that works for that, a lot of the people I work with, is to put the bench back on a slight incline, a very slight incline. Like I'm talking like 100, 110 degrees. And then I'll usually put dumbbells under the person's feet so they can stabilize their lumbar region. So they're on a bit of an arc. And that way they're activating the anterior deltoids and taking all the strain off the rotator cuff and keeping it on the actual muscle. Now, I find that works for most people, men and women. Again, there's nothing wrong with doing 90 degrees if you feel 90 degrees works better for you. But over the years, I've learned that if I want to save shoulder pain, shoulder impingement, rotator cuff injuries, there's certain angles that I have to readjust for people, myself included. Okay, so it's not always textbook. Yeah, according to PT manual, bench has to be at 90 degrees. I haven't used 90 degrees of anyone on shoulder press in like 15 years. Just for that reason, because I find it does not stimulate the actual anterior deltoid muscle belly properly. So I find a slight incline on the way back. Okay, like I said, put some dumbbells under your feet because you're going to be on somewhat of an arc and really try to stimulate that anterior deltoid. You'll probably feel it more in your shoulders than anywhere else. Whereas if you're at 90 degrees, you might start to feel it in your back. You might actually start to feel it in your rotator cuff. So my recommendation is keep the angle 100, 110 degrees and try that. All right, next question. Nick, I'm a bit concerned about my testosterone levels. I haven't been feeling I haven't been feeling horny at all for the past 5 or 6 days. Do you think I should go on TRT? Okay. Sorry, that question kind of surprised me. um, okay, well, if you haven't been feeling horny for 5 or 6 days, again, just like the arthritis, I wouldn't sound the alarms right now. Okay. I mean, who knows? You could be really stressed. Maybe you're lacking sleep. Maybe there's a lot going on in your life. There could be multiple reasons why you're not horny, okay, or why your libido is not feeling as strong as it usually is. Okay, so don't start thinking right away that you need to go on TRT. Also, lack of libido is usually not the first sign that you're lower, your testosterone levels are low. It's usually, there's other symptoms that you realize before that, like chronic fatigue is one of them, right? Mood, if you're a little bit more irritable, right? But those are two things. Loss of appetite, that's another one for a lot of people, but it's not always just libido. Now, also 5 or 6 days is not crazy. Now, if it goes into like 3 or 4 weeks, then I would be saying, okay, you might want to get those levels checked. But depending on your age, I don't know how old you are. You haven't mentioned in your question how old you are, but I always recommend to my male clients who are over the age of 40 to go and get their testosterone levels checked at least once a year, just to check where they're at. Because a lot of people are surprised to find out that their levels are a lot lower than they should be. So the whole thing with the libido, though, yeah, your testosterone levels could be low, but I mean, you have to start looking at other things too. Like, how's your diet been? Is your diet in check? Is your sleep in check, right? How are your stress levels? Are you managing your stress levels? So before you start thinking, oh, my testosterone level is low, it might be low because of those factors, right? And all of a sudden you've got to figure out ways, okay, how can I manage my stress better? How can I get a little bit more sleep? Can I clean up my diet? And then once you're doing those things, all of a sudden your libido comes back. It's like, okay, well, you probably don't need to be on TRT, right? Or you have a strong libido, but your testosterone levels are still somewhat low. You might have to be on TRT. But the only way you're going to truly know if you need to be on testosterone replacement therapy is if you go and get your levels checked. That's the only way you're going to know. So you have to go get your blood work done. Now, I can't sit here and tell you, yes, you need to go on TRT because you're not horny. That would be very, very just reckless of me to actually tell anyone that, right? So no, I don't think that that's the answer right now. I mean, it very well could be the answer in a few weeks down the line once you get your blood work done. But I would be looking at ways to manage your stress levels, get a little bit more sleep, make sure your diet's in check, make sure you're exercising regularly, and then see how you feel. Okay. But I wouldn't just because you're not feeling as horny as you say over the last 5 or 6 days that right away you should go on TRT. Okay. Because don't forget too, once you've made that decision to go on TRT, that is a commitment that you're making for the rest of your life. That's not something that you can just go on and say, well, I'm just going to go on TRT for a few weeks and come off again and go back on. And I think today's generation calls that blasting and cruising. No, once you're on, you're on. Okay. Unless, say you're on and you're trying to have kids and you have to come off, and okay, well, that's a different story. And then you got to go on PCT, and that's a whole other story though. But once you're making that decision to go on TRT, that's something that's a lifelong commitment. So don't just make the decision just because your libido is in the tank for 5 or 6 days. Hey, Nick, I was traveling for the last month and didn't train at all while I was away. My first week back in the gym has been hell. My strength is easily down 40% on most exercises. Is it possible that I lost muscle this quickly? My weight has only dropped 6 pounds, so not much of a difference on the scale. No, I mean, you probably lost a little bit of muscle, but no, in 4 weeks, you're not going to lose a crazy amount of muscle unless you're sick, you're laid up in a hospital bed, and your body's in going to a catabolic state. So no, you're not going to lose muscle that quickly. But what happens is when you take an extended period of time off from training, your body stops producing what's called glycogen. And I've talked about glycogen before. Glycogen is the best way to describe glycogen. It's like oxygen for your muscles, okay, in simple terms. So without glycogen, your body just doesn't have the actual oxygen, or your muscles don't have that oxygen needed, the blood flow needed to pump out those weights. So when you start training again, your body starts creating that glycogen again. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I remember how to do this. Your body remembers the weights, and your weights go back up again fairly quickly. Give it time. I would say give it 2-3 weeks. It's not going to come back overnight, but you most likely didn't lose If you lost muscle, I'd say maybe you lost a pound, maybe 2. But of those 6 pounds that you lost, most of that's just going to be glycogen and water. You'll put that back on very quickly. I'll use, when I had my appendix taken out a few years ago, I couldn't train for, I think it was about 4 or 5 weeks. When I came back to the gym, I remember this, I was down about 22 pounds. I did lose some muscle, but for me, it was more, again, the glycogen factor. And I put that weight back on within 3 weeks, and my weights were back up again. So no, you're not going to lose muscle that quickly. Now, if you take 6 months off the gym, yeah, you're going to lose a lot of muscle. Absolutely, because that's a really extended period of time. But 4 weeks, no, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I know it's always a little bit tricky coming back to the gym after an extended period of time off. I've had clients have to do that. I've had to go through it. I've had to go through it twice. I had to go through it when I had my vasectomy done as well. I had to take 2 weeks off from training. So same thing. I mean, I came back, things were tight, the joints were tight, the muscles were not used to being contracted as much as they normally are. So yeah, I had to go through all that. It was like going through first week of training all over again, but you get over it, and then your body adapts again and you get back into your training routine. So the only thing I'd recommend though is make sure you're hydrated. Make sure you're drinking tons of water, because you want to fill up those muscle bellies with as much water and glycogen as you possibly can. Okay. If you want to, you can pick up some creatine, load up some creatine in your pre-workout, your post-workout shakes. That'll also help replenish your glycogen storage more efficiently and more quickly as well, to get you back to where you were before your trip. But moral of the story, if you're going away on vacation for 4 weeks, guys, there's gyms in the world. You can find a gym to train at, right? There are gyms everywhere, right? If you can't find a gym, then train outside, do some exercise. So you should be doing some body weight stuff, some push-ups, sit-ups, whatever you can, leg raises, body weight squats, like everything that you can possibly think of just to keep your body in shape, right? So just because you're taking time off from the gym, or sorry, time away on vacation, doesn't mean you should be taking time off from the gym, as I meant to say. All right, next question. Nick, there are no good public gyms in downtown Vancouver. Would you ever consider opening up your own membership-based gym? I don't think you would have much competition. Yeah, so my client Grant, we were talking about this earlier this week, and I'm going to say that I would absolutely love to open up a commercial gym. I would. A member-based gym where I could have like a Toys R Us full of equipment, definitely. It would be great. I'd love it. The problem with Vancouver, especially downtown Vancouver, real estate prices are ridiculous, just stupid. So just to turn a profit, or not even to turn a profit, let's just say just to cover your lease, you're looking at, if you need to have a commercial sized gym like the gyms that they have, let's say in the Valley, right? Like in say Coquitlam or Port Moody, you need to have at least 20, 30,000 square feet. So when you think at the price point per square foot downtown Vancouver right now, you're looking at easily 60, 70K a month, minimum. I mean, that's a lot of memberships you got to sell, right? And then on top of that, you're going to have personal trainers in there bringing in clients, and there's a lot of PT sessions you're going to have to sell. So you can't be giving away $20 memberships at a gym like that. It's not going to work. So I'd love to. I just don't think, I can't see how it's profitable in downtown Vancouver. I really can't. And you can see it now. We don't really have any big gyms in downtown Vancouver for that reason. I think the biggest gym that we have right now is Equinox, and Equinox is a brand. They're backed by gyms all over North America. Actually, I think they might even have gyms right now in Asia with Equinox. I'm not too sure, but someone was telling me that the other day. So, I mean, they're huge. They've got money backing them. But unless you have that type of package, no, I don't think so. I don't think it's profitable. I don't think it's lucrative. I don't think it's a good idea. I do think that if a gym were to come in and they had money backing them, yeah, I think they would do quite well, but the money has to be there. But I can't see it being a profitable business. In my industry, for what I do, it makes much more sense to open up a private training facility and keep the groups to private training, small group training, partner training, and have a roster of personal trainers that bring in their own clients. That to me is a great business model. And you don't have to deal with thousands of members and people trying to get as many members as you possibly can in and trying to make these sales, and you don't have to worry about it. So no, I won't be opening up a big public gym anytime soon. Not in Vancouver anyway. Maybe somewhere else in the world, somewhere that's a little bit more affordable and a cost-effective lease. But to pay 70 or 80K a month for a lease, I just can't see that making any sense. Okay. Nick, I know you have mentioned this before, but could you please elaborate on as to why you don't like giving your clients deadlifts in the gym? Uh, yeah, I'm not really a big fan of deadlifts. I find the risks outweigh the benefits when it comes to deadlifts. I've never felt right doing deadlifts, and I mean, I've tried them over the years. I brought them in, I've taken them out, but every time I've done deadlifts, and I even actually hired a coach a few years ago to teach me how to do conventional deadlifts, squats, bench press, just to really perfect my form. I bought a 6-session package with this powerlifting coach. This was probably back, well, actually more than a few years ago. It'll go back to maybe 2005 or 6. It was actually very beneficial. I learned a lot. But I learned that deadlifts just don't work for my body. They just don't. Like every time I did deadlifts, I was feeling severe sharp pain in my lower back. So I took them out, and I've never really noticed that much of a difference by taking them out, that I wasn't able to achieve a great back on stage or develop my spinal erectors by taking them out. If anything, when I had them in, it used to really bother me when I would do other exercises. So I would do deadlifts, let's say on a Monday, and by Thursday, when it was time for me to do legs, my back would still be in pain. So then I would try to put maybe back on Thursday and do legs on Monday, but it didn't matter because every time I tried to squat, my lower back would be so sore from the deadlift. So it didn't matter where I structured the workouts throughout the week. And then on other exercises too, even when I would do certain movements like seated rows after, they would bother me all week. And so I thought, you know what? It's not worth it. It's an exercise that I just find the risks outweigh the benefits for me, so I don't put them in. Now, when it comes to my clients, a few of my clients, I will give them deadlifts. Like I said, not every exercise is designed for everyone, but there's some exercises that work better for some people versus others. So just because an exercise doesn't work for me doesn't mean I have all my clients not do it. To say, okay, well, we'll try them for you. I have some people that really like doing deadlifts, so I put them in their plan. But I ask them to send me videos of themselves doing the deadlift, especially for my online clients, so I can just make sure that they're doing them correctly. Because one wrong movement on a deadlift, you get a slip disc, herniated disc, you're out for weeks, months, and that's a chronic injury. That's an injury that reoccurs, comes back, it lingers. You talk to anyone who's ever had a herniated disc, they'll tell you it's not like a one-time thing. It lingers for years to come. It's like a car accident. One slight twitch, you sit funny, you fall, you trip, and all of a sudden that slip disc comes back. So it's not an exercise that I feel has much benefits to it. I really don't. It's more of a powerlifting movement anyway, but I don't tell people not to do it. It's just, for me, it doesn't work. It never has. And it's something I'm just like, after all these years now, why put them back in? I feel there's no benefit to me. So I don't do them. I still do a lot of heavy compound movements. I do a lot of barbell back squats, barbell front squats. I do all my bench incline, barbell bench press. I do my flat barbell bench press. So I still do quite a few of the compound movements, barbell military press, just deadlifts. I keep them out for that reason. Okay. I just find, again, too much risk, not enough benefits, way too much strain on the lumbar region, and sore all week. That stops me from doing other movements that I like to do, like the squats, as I mentioned. That's why. All right, next question. Nick, what was the best Mr. Olympia of all time, in your opinion? Best Mr. Olympia. I don't know if it was the best Mr. Olympia, but I'll tell you what my favorite Mr. Olympia was. It was the 2009 Mr. Olympia when Jay Cutler made the comeback. And if you remember, 2006, Jay won his first Mr. Olympia after chasing Ronnie for, I think it was 6 years. He was always placing second. I think he had 4 consecutive second place finishes next to Ronnie Coleman. And in 2006, he finally won. Mind you, he beat an older version of Ronnie Coleman that had injuries at that point. I think Coleman has 10 years on Cutler. So even Jay will say that Olympia that he won, I mean, he didn't beat the best version of Ronnie Coleman. But you know what? He won. And then in 2007, he won his second controversial win. I personally think that win should have gone to Victor Martinez, who was runner-up. But, I mean, he still won. A win is a win. And in 2008, he lost the Mr. Olympia to Dexter Jackson, which Dexter Jackson, if you know bodybuilding, was a much smaller but much more conditioned bodybuilder than Jay Cutler at that particular Mr. Olympia. So at that point, 2008, Jay lost, came in second place, and everyone wrote him off. Said, okay, he's done. His career's done. He was getting a little bit older. I think at that point he was in his mid-30s, which Mid-30s is getting up there for bodybuilding. Obviously there's some exceptions to the rule, like Ronnie Coleman, but not everyone's a Ronnie Coleman. So mid-30s are getting up there. And then so in 2009, everyone wrote him off. I think a lot of the so-called experts even had him out of the top 5. And when he showed up on 2009, when I saw him come out, I was like, holy shit, I'd never seen that version of Jay Cutler. And I was like, I think he's going to win the show. And he was the first bodybuilder to ever lose the title and then come back and reclaim it again. So that was a huge story. And I mean, then he went on to win 2010. So that was his last Mr. Olympia that he won. And I think in 2011, he placed second to Phil Heath. And then he came back, took 2012 off, came back 2013 and placed, I think, 5th or 6th. And obviously, I mean, he was getting older. I think he had a tear in his bicep. So it was time to retire. But yeah, 2009 for that reason. I think Jay just came back and just shocked the world. And that to me was one of the best Mr. Olympias. And not only for that storyline, but also because when you look at that lineup, and we're talking like you look at if you're watching this and you know bodybuilding, then you know that lineup was insane. You had Jay Cutler, you had Branch Warren. Branch Warren looked amazing. That was his best, in my opinion, his best condition he ever showed up on stage. He placed second. And then Dexter Jackson, who was the previous Mr. Olympia in 2008, he placed 3rd. I think Kai Green placed 4th. Phil Heath, the 7-time Mr. Olympia, placed 5th. So it was a really good lineup. I mean, all those guys looked amazing. So I don't think, I can't recall a Mr. Olympia that was that entertaining. You know, these days I don't watch the bodybuilders as much. You know, I was more interested in it back then, but I think that would be a hard Mr. Olympia to beat as far as entertainment value. But yeah, I think 2009 Mr. Olympia, in my opinion anyways, that was probably the most exciting Mr. Olympia to watch for that reason. Because even now, there hasn't been a single bodybuilder who's won their title, lost the title, and come back and win it again. That hasn't happened since Jay Cutler's done it, and it never happened before Jay Cutler did it. Yeah, Arnold did it back when he, in 1980, when he won, which was a controversial win. I don't think he should have won that Mr. Olympia, but Arnold didn't lose the title. He retired from bodybuilding, took some time off to film in some movies, and then came back and competed again. So he never lost the title and reclaimed it. He just took time off. He retired, and then he came out of retirement and won it. And it was probably Olympia that he probably shouldn't have won, but he was Arnold Schwarzenegger. All right. Last question. Here it is. Sorry, I lost my spot. Oh, okay. Nick, have you seen 50 Cent lately? He looks like he's put on a lot of body fat. Is this because now that he's not working out much at all, or muscles? Oh, sorry. Is this because now that he's not working out as much at all, his muscle has turned to fat? Or is it just because he's older? I don't think it's either. I don't know 50 Cent's training routine. I know back in 2010, I think he lost something like 55 pounds for a movie. He was playing a football player who I think had cancer. And so he lost like 55 pounds. And so he lost all that muscle and got super, super skinny for this movie. And then he was able to put the muscle back on afterwards. But I think just a lot of what happens if a lot of these guys, a lot of these entertainers, especially if fitness is not in their lifestyle, like I don't know 50 Cent, but I don't think takes the gym as seriously as say like a Mark Wahlberg or The Rock, who's obviously, The Rock is 50 years old. I mean, he still looks freaking amazing. So I don't think it's age. I think it's lifestyle. And again, there's a misconception that people out there think that muscle, if you stop training, will turn to fat. That's not true. Okay, that doesn't happen. If you stop training and you have all this muscle, you'll just lose your muscle. You'll go back to looking what I call normal or average. But you're not just going to put on a bunch of fat. The muscle just doesn't turn into fat. Now, if you stop training, you're eating Doritos and cookies all day, then yeah, you're going to get fat. But it's not that the muscle's turning to fat. It's just that your body composition is changing because you're eating like shit and you're not exercising. You're completely sedentary. That's why you're getting fat. No, I've seen 50 Cent. Yeah, people were sending me videos of 50 Cent and making fun of him at the Super Bowl, and he laughed it off. I mean, I don't think it bothers him too much, but yeah, I think 50's in his mid 40s now. So he's not that old. And back when he first came out of the scene, he would have been in his mid 20s. So we're looking 20-year difference. I'm not going to say it's age because I work with a lot of people who are in their 40s who look better than they did in their 20s, and they'll tell me that themselves. So there's something to be said about muscle maturity. I think 50 Cent's probably, if I was guessing, I'm assuming that he's probably not training as hard as he used to train when he was younger. maybe he's enjoying the finer things in life now that he's got a little bit more money. You know, that happens too. When people get a lot of money, they become a little bit more complacent, more relaxed. They start eating, you know, different type of diet, eating richer foods, maybe drinking more. So it could be a combination of those things, but I don't believe it has anything to do with age. I really don't, because especially when you can look at guys like The Rock and Wahlberg, as I said, who are also celebrities, and look at them. They haven't skipped a beat. Those guys look amazing right now. So it's all about your lifestyle. I think you can actually get better with age. I mean, yeah, of course, as we get older, we're going to lose some muscle mass. That does happen, but that doesn't happen until you get to like your 70s and your 80s. Like, look at guys like Stallone. They're still going. And yeah, you can throw the anabolic steroids and stuff. I don't care. They're still like, look at something like Sylvester Stallone right now. He's a perfect example. Yes, he openly uses GH, and I'm sure he uses anabolics as well. I'm sure I think he's actually admitted to using anabolics. But there's not many 75-year-old men walking around that look like Sylvester Stallone, because he still works out. He still follows a clean diet. So it can be done. I just don't think fitness is a big part of 50 Cent's lifestyle, right? Especially by judging by the way he looks. So someone like that, though, we know what he can look like. So if he decides to go back to the gym and train regularly and clean up his diet, I'm sure you could see a different version of him within the next 6 months if he really put his mind to it. He might not look like he did back in 2003 when he first hit the scene, but he can still look pretty damn good. So a lot of it has to do with genetics, right? But that's what I think. I think it's not in his lifestyle. He doesn't incorporate it into his daily routine. And therefore, you know what? He's comfortable in his body. And I say good for him. Stop fat shaming 50 Cent. Okay? Stop it. Stop. It's not good to fat shame anybody. He laughed it off. It didn't seem to bother him. So if he's happy with the way that he looks and he feels comfortable in his skin, that's all that matters. So I think we haven't seen the best 50 Cent yet. I think what's going to happen is he's going to make a comeback, and I think he's going to come back with like ripped abs, pecs. Give it time. Dr. Dre did it back in like 2012, 13. He came out looking crazy. Now he's kind of let himself go again. But if they want to, they can do it. Oh, he just needs to have the motivation. All right. That's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going out on Friday afternoon. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to your diet, training, or supplementation, please feel free to either email me your questions, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at @fitcosgrove_, and my email address is nick@foreverfitperformance.com. Guys, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for supporting the channel, and I will see you all next week.